Fog rolled low across the Northern California hills when the Zodiac killer first struck, leaving behind a scene that would haunt investigators for decades. It was the late 1960s, a time of shifting culture and quiet suburban nights, when the Bay Area's calm began to fracture under the weight of fear. Couples parked along rural roads, thinking only of privacy and starlight, unaware that a figure was watching from the dark. The first attacks were sudden, methodical, and without clear motive, an ambush carried out with chilling precision. Each location shared a sense of isolation: gravel shoulders, tree lines, and the faint hum of distant traffic. When police arrived, they found evidence that spoke of control rather than chaos: spent shell casings neatly grouped, tire impressions angled toward quick escape routes, and victims positioned as if deliberately displayed. The killer's pattern was not immediately clear, but his confidence was unmistakable. Within weeks, letters began arriving at local newspapers, written in a tone both taunting and analytical. The handwriting was deliberate, the phrasing cold, and the signature, a crosshair-like symbol, became an emblem of terror. Enclosed within some of these letters were cryptograms, grids of symbols and letters that promised to reveal his identity if solved. Reporters debated whether to publish them, while editors weighed public safety against the risk of encouraging further violence. The Bay Area, once defined by innovation and open landscapes, now felt watched. Patrol cars lingered longer on rural routes, and couples who once sought quiet now stayed home. The Zodiac's words had transformed fear into something organized, something that could arrive by mail as easily as by gunfire. When the first coded letters reached the San Francisco Chronicle, the newsroom fell silent, except for the sound of paper unfolding. Reporters studied the symbols, unsure whether they were genuine or a cruel hoax. Police departments across multiple counties began coordinating, comparing ballistic evidence from separate attacks that shared similar ammunition and weapon types. The nights grew tense. Dispatch radios crackled with reports of suspicious vehicles near lakes, lovers' lanes, and park turnouts. Officers moved in pairs, flashlights cutting through fog and brush as they searched for any trace of the suspect. At one scene, investigators marked shell casings with chalk circles before collecting them in labeled envelopes, sealing each with tape to preserve fingerprints. The air smelled faintly of gunpowder and damp earth. Witness statements were taken under harsh fluorescent lights, each survivor describing a masked man with a calm, almost rehearsed voice. Sketch artists worked late, pencils scratching across paper as they tried to capture the shape of a hood, the glint of glasses, the stillness of a predator who never seemed rushed. Evidence technicians logged every item, footprints, fibers, and torn fabric, into chain of custody forms that traveled from field to lab. Meanwhile, the public followed every update through newspaper headlines and radio bulletins. Parents warned teenagers to avoid secluded areas, and gas stations began closing earlier. The killer's reach extended beyond his physical crimes. It lived in the collective unease that settled over the region. Even the most routine sounds, a car door closing, a phone ringing, could send a ripple of tension through the night. As the investigation deepened, law enforcement agencies from Vallejo to San Francisco pooled resources, forming one of the most complex task forces of its time. Detectives cross-referenced ballistics reports, handwriting samples, and the peculiar phrasing of the letters. Cryptanalysts, including civilian codebreakers, spent long nights bent over graph paper, substituting letters for symbols, searching for linguistic patterns that might reveal the killer's identity. One cipher was cracked by a local schoolteacher and his wife, revealing a disturbing message but no name. The discovery only heightened the mystery. Forensic work in that era relied heavily on manual comparison. No computerized databases, no DNA sequencing, just magnifying lenses, typewriters, and patience. Officers canvassed neighborhoods, knocking on doors, asking about strangers seen near parked cars or along remote roads. Some residents recalled headlights flashing twice. Others remembered a man lingering near payphones. Each lead was logged, mapped, and followed, but few produced results. Community meetings filled with anxious faces as police urged calm and cooperation. Candlelight vigils were held for the victims, their families standing quietly beside framed photographs and folded hands. The Bay Area's sense of safety had fractured, replaced by curfews and whispered warnings. Newspapers published diagrams of the ciphers, inviting readers to help decode them, turning the case into a public puzzle that blurred the line between investigation and obsession. Every new letter reignited the fear, arriving with postmarks that mocked the authorities' inability to stop him. The killer seemed to thrive on attention, measuring his success by the reach of his words rather than the number of his victims. Over the following years, the case evolved into a labyrinth of suspects, theories, and contradictions. Handwriting experts disagreed on matches, and polygraph results proved inconclusive. Some suspects fit the psychological profile, but lacked physical evidence. Others had alibis that held under scrutiny. The killer's correspondence continued sporadically, each letter referencing past crimes and hinting at future ones that never materialized. Investigators debated whether later communications were authentic or the work of imitators drawn to the notoriety. The media's role became central, with television specials and newspaper exposés dissecting every clue. Crime labs re-examined evidence as technology advanced, testing envelopes for latent prints and saliva traces decades after the original crimes. Yet the results remained frustratingly incomplete. Theories ranged from lone gunman to organized conspirator, from local resident to transient drifter. Each possibility opened a new path, and each path ended in uncertainty. Retired detectives revisited their notes, hoping a fresh perspective might reveal what years of repetition had obscured. The case files grew thicker, filled with photographs, diagrams, and transcripts of interviews that led nowhere definitive. For the public, the killer's symbol, a circle with a cross through it, became an icon of unsolved menace. It appeared on t-shirts, posters, and documentaries, a reminder of how mystery can outlast memory. Even as time passed, the name continued to surface whenever new technology promised breakthroughs. The Zodiac's identity, however, remained just beyond reach, hidden behind layers of coded language and vanished evidence. Decades later, the story still lingers in the collective consciousness of the Bay Area and beyond. Cold case units periodically revisit the evidence, applying modern forensic tools to items once examined under far cruder conditions. DNA testing, digital enhancement of fingerprints, and database cross-referencing have all been attempted, yet no conclusive match has emerged. For surviving victims and the families of those lost, the absence of closure carries its own quiet weight. They remember not only the crimes, but the long years of waiting, of hearing new theories rise and fall. Historians and criminologists continue to study the case as a turning point in American criminal investigation. A moment when communication between killer and media reshaped public fear. The letters, preserved in archives, are now handled with gloves and stored in climate-controlled rooms. Their paper yellowed, but their impact undiminished. Each symbol still invites decoding. Each phrase still echoes with the arrogance of anonymity. The Zodiac killer remains a figure suspended between fact and myth, a reminder of how one person's calculated cruelty can alter an entire region's sense of safety. Streetlights now illuminate the once dark roads, and new generations drive them unaware of what happened there. Yet, for those who know the story, the quiet hum of a car engine on a foggy night can still recall the unease that began half a century ago. The mystery endures, not because of what is known, but because of what remains unanswered.